Cardano is starting to find itself in the limelight as the only decentralized top 5 blockchain with smart contracts that isn't crippled by ridiculous fees. On top of that, elite segments of the developed nations are starting to notice that Cardano may actually be out to change the world, and this might be an irresistible appeal. Ready? Let's go. This is episode 199. That means the next episode is episode 200. That's a pretty big benchmark since we've done 200 videos since March of this year. We're going to celebrate that with another live stream, but I don't want to do it 24 hours from when this video drops because that will be Thursday night in North America. And I'm afraid some people might stay up late to participate in that and then have to go to work on Friday. So instead, we'll do it in the normal slot at the normal time, 24 hours from then. So we're going to skip the video tomorrow, and then we're going to do a live video at the normal time, which will be Friday night for most of North America and Saturday on the other sides of the Pacific and the Atlantic, so that nobody is staying up to do this thing and then having to go to work the next morning. Before we get to the Charles interview that dropped from the Harvard International Review, we're going to cover a few news items, starting with this. It looks like this is actually happening. So a lot of you know Paul Oakenfold got Charles to come on stage and had him try to DJ for a second. And I believe when during just sort of like the interview with Paul Oakenfold, they actually did put this image on the screen. I could be mistaken, but I think we saw this on the actual screen. And somebody asked Charles, when's the album dropping? And he said soon and dropped this. With Charles, you can't tell. Maybe he's joking, maybe he's not. But then we saw something else. It looks like mainstream EDM news, that's what I'm calling this website, edm.com, is picking up this story as well. They ran this headline: there's a new Paul Oakenfold album arriving on the Cardano blockchain. Ethereum co-founder, I guess it's unavoidable. I guess we just have to submit that they're going to submit to them calling Charles the Ethereum co-founder forever. But Ethereum co-founder Charles Hoskinson is forging relationships with some of the most influential businessmen in EDM. That's electronic dance music. And down below here, we see that the two of them are working on a collaborative album of EDM. No surprise there. It also says that Charles, it looks like from some of the quotes, it looks like Charles is also working with Carl Cox and Alan Schulman. Maybe that's Alan, I don't know, Schulman. Some of you out there might know. But it's kind of interesting because not because I think these are celebrity endorsements that will somehow garner a whole bunch of new users, but I think it is some level of penetration into sort of what I think is an inevitable interface between music and NFTs. And there's some projects focused on that already. They're out there. It's something we've talked about before in the crypto space. It's an idea that's out there, and I think we all agree it's probably something that's going to happen because you can do things like residual royalties. So it's really interesting to see Cardano actually penetrating into that space, developing some relationships, because we're still at the beginning stages of all these industry adoption cases, and a lot can grow out of something like this over the course of 5 or 10 years. For those of you who participated in the NFT hunt in the Cardano virtual summit, where we navigated our little avatars around, did various things, touch all the water on the main stage island, all that kind of stuff, collected all seven of those NFTs. I'm using that term loosely because it's really just a little image that showed up on a certain tab within the virtual summit. You probably remember that if you collected all those, there was some talk that you'd be entered into some kind of a lottery system, and there'd be winners of this lottery, and they would actually be awarded with NFTs in some form. It looks like somebody asked the IOHK Twitter handle when that was going to happen. They said the team is putting the finishing touches to the Summit NFT redemption process. Please bear with us a while longer, but it sounds like they're getting kind of close. They say, since we were using a random 10-character generator, we can only commence this process after the summit was over and files retrieved. Makes sense. Takes some time to do this stuff. And it is kind of like just a bonus thing they're doing on top of all the other work that IOHK is doing. Down below here, at Breaking Ada of the Break Pool asked an important question, one that I'm still pretty hazy on. Do you know if there will be 1,000 people who receive the full set of 7 NFTs or 7,000 winners of 1 NFT each? I have no idea what the answer to that question is, but I'm interested. And for everybody out there who's anxious to get their hands on those little NFTs, it looks like we're making a little bit of progress, but we still don't know when exactly that's going to happen. For those of you who like macro news and its possible impacts on crypto and Cardano specifically, you're probably keeping tabs on this whole China Evergrand thing. And we have a little bit of an update here. CNBC ran with this headline: Chinese developer misses bond payment as stress spreads beyond Evergrand crisis. This would be a very normal headline lately, except for this beyond Evergrand crisis piece. This is the whole contagion issue. Is this going to spread out beyond Evergrand into the rest of the Chinese real estate development sector, into the rest of the Chinese economy? Those are questions some people are asking. And a lot of people are very alarmist on this. And some people are like, there's nothing to see here, move along. We don't really know what the answer is. So many, we'll let all the macro commentators analyze this to death like they're already doing. But what's interesting here is they are citing the fact that Fantasia Holdings, another Chinese developer, has missed its payments on a bond that matured on Monday. So it's no longer just Evergrand that's missing payments on debt. Now we have Fantasia, which has also missed payment. And they're also citing, the articles around this are also citing Cynic Holdings as being sort of the three real estate developers in China that seem to be under the most stress. We've got Evergrande, Fantasia, and Cynic. But actually, if you look at the whole sector, and if you've followed sort of the ghost city, ghost tower development problem, I think at this point we can just call it a problem as opposed to a phenomenon or an issue. That's been going on for years in China. And to the extent that that affects such a centrally driven economy like China is, you can imagine how it's hard to see how that wouldn't impact more than just 3 players in the Chinese real estate scene. Again, we won't go into too much detail on this. I think there are tons of commentators doing all kinds of analysis on this right now, but just know there is a little bit of movement on this, and it's not just limited to Evergrande. Is actually pretty predictable because even the very early analysis of Evergrande that made it into the mainstream press pointed out that as soon as the Chinese government adopted the 3 red lines policy, almost all of the major real estate developers were violating one of those 3 rules, which were meant to deleverage the whole sector. And I think there was, out of the top 20, I saw, I'm going to misquote this number, but I saw analysis that showed that like only one out of the top 20 real estate developers was in compliance with all 3 of those rules. We also saw this update out of DC Spark on their upcoming Flint wallet. They dropped a few mock-ups of what the experimental early version of Flint is going to look like. And one of the mock-ups said something pretty interesting. Here we see it says interact with dApps while maintaining security by using hardware wallets. This is one of those things I think we all assumed this would have to be the case. It would have been I think a bad outcome if you couldn't use your ADA assets or other assets on your Ledger or Trezor or other hardware wallet to interact with dApps. Of course, workaround would have been just to have a separate wallet, not a hardware wallet, and use that to interact with dApps. But I think this is what we all were hoping for and expecting, and anything less than this would have been not as good. But no one had actually come right out and said, hey, this wallet is going to allow you to interact with dApps using your cold storage hardware wallets. So we know, at least with Flint, that's going to be the case. And I assume it's going to have to be standard within the ecosystem that every wallet that's really taken seriously that has hardware wallet compatibility is going to have to allow you to interact with those dApps, because Cardano is getting all the right kinds of attention in all the right kinds of places lately, guys. This is the Harvard International Review, which is a quarterly international affairs magazine that's been around for over 4 decades. On their About page, you can see that they've been the home of commentary by 43 presidents, prime ministers, 4 secretaries general of the UN, 4 economics Nobel Prize winners, and 7 Nobel Peace Prize winners. This is a serious publication. Harvard International Review is probably read by actual policymakers who can actually have an impact on Cardano adoption. And they do a long print interview here with Charles and also Joel Telpner, who's the chief legal officer at IOHK. And unsurprisingly, to anybody who follows Cardano, they represent the ecosystem very well. The interviewer also asks the right questions, which I think is always necessary for an effective interview. And right off the bat, he gets to this question, which I think will probably be pretty revealing for a lot of the readers of this publication. He says, hey, you've got this viewpoint that's very unintuitive as to the developing world leading the way with crypto adoption instead of Silicon Valley, Europe, or China. And of course, Charles goes through the basic stuff that we've all heard a million times about demographics and opportunity and, the whole leveling out the playing field kind of thing. While that's all kind of like very familiar for all of us at this point, a lot of people reading this magazine are going to find that equally unintuitive as the interviewer implies in his question. But I think as soon as they see the explanation and think about it, they're going to realize that there's a good chance that's actually the case. I think that's really important because with our developed country policymakers, a lot of the themes of decentralization don't seem to really resonate with them. I mean, they're kind of in the governance business, and everybody having so much more control of their financial destiny doesn't exactly ring as consistent with the goals of governance for a lot of current policymakers. But what does seem to resonate with them is what Charles drives home right here. The biggest system that needs an update because of globalization and the internet is the financial system. I think anybody who uses the financial system in the developed world would probably agree with that. And the piece that resonates with these policymakers is that if they regulate crypto too hard, they're going to get left behind. Over the last several decades, I mean, whether we call it 20, 30, 40 years, we've seen the rise of the economic power of a country like China. And now, several decades later, there is this like very distinct possibility of being outcompeted in a vast number of different industries. And I hope that developed country policymakers are a little bit more attuned to this over-regulating things and being outcompeted because of that kind of danger. Look at this. They've even got a picture of the man with a white horse. How much more strongly can you say, let's save the world? So immediately they jump into the sort of crypto topic of the day, which is the El Salvador Bitcoin adoption. And they talk about that for a bit. And the interviewer asks a question that I've seen a lot of people in the Cardano ecosystem also ask. That's, could you ever see a scenario where ADA constitutes a significant portion of a nation state's economic activity? How does that make you think about maybe the monetary policy of Cardano? So, of course, the answer is you don't actually want, if you're of a certain school of thought, you don't actually want the ADAs and Bitcoins and Ethers of the world to be the currency of a nation state because there's too much fluctuation. There's no price predictability versus almost any other unit of trade. And the real answer is Djed. So Charles gets there. He says, these are called algorithmic stablecoins, and we've invented one called Djed. We're showcasing here at the conference. There's dozens of others like MakerDAO. And he basically goes through and explains why you actually don't want the Bitcoin to be your unit of account in a large national economy. You actually want a stablecoin because it's stable. The interviewer asked about another big topic in crypto right now, CBDCs. And Charles said two things. He said two things. One of them was, yeah, we're going to be able to do all the behavioral economic stuff. If you want to subsidize people like we just did with COVID, it's going to be a lot easier on crypto rails. And if you want more information about that, Raoul Pal of Real Vision has gone into a lot of detail in the past about how he thinks behavioral economics might become a gigantic tool for central banks the second they have CBDCs. Of Of course, people get a little bit freaked out when you talk about that kind of stuff. But the other thing Charles talked about is something that conspiracy theorists have been freaked out about forever, maybe 100 years. He says the other big thing you can do with CBDCs is the creation of a world reserve currency. We've had soft reserve currencies like the US dollar or China, but he says you could actually create a basket of different currencies and have an algorithmic stablecoin, which could be a real world reserve currency. Of course, the second you start talking about that, the conspiracy theorists are going to start talking about, the globalist cabal taking over all of our economies and stripping us of our rights. But actually, I think Charles is right. We could have a world reserve currency based on a stablecoin. We already have the US dollar, the petrodollar system, as default world reserve currency. And it looks like everything is going to go to central bank digital currencies. So if we have our choice between another world reserve currency that's sort of prone to arbitrary manipulation by a central bank or an algorithmic stablecoin, it seems like there might be a better future with an algorithmic stablecoin, but who knows? They also go into quite a bit of detail about the crypto provisions in the infrastructure bill, something we covered very, very heavily on this channel, and also the resistance of certain prominent figures in the government like Elizabeth Warren and Janet Yellen to crypto. And I think Charles kind of sums it up just with these two lines. The long and the short of it is this industry is here to stay. It's too big, too prominent, and I think most importantly is the demographic issue. The youth are on the side of the industry. It doesn't really matter if Elizabeth Warren and Janet Yellen hate crypto with a passion deep in her dragon heart. If she has nothing but fire breathing for crypto, I don't think it'll actually matter over a long enough timeline. I can't help but think that no matter how hard they try to resist it, their time is limited and the generations coming up are way too much on the side of crypto. The interviewer also asked Charles a really interesting question, and it's something we kind of overlook a little bit in crypto. We talk a lot about how blockchains could be used to create these dark dystopian futures where all of the money is algorithmically controlled by a totalitarian government. The interviewer asked Charles specifically about China, and he has something pretty interesting to say that he said a million times before, but I think maybe a lot of people outside the Cardano ecosystem maybe haven't thought about this way. He says authoritarian, totalitarian regimes that hate freedom hate cryptocurrencies. It's just that simple. These technologies are fundamentally incompatible with each other. And I think this is pretty much right. How many times did China ban crypto? It's been repeated over and over. It was the constant fear and uncertainty and doubt. When would China ban crypto? Will it be the third week of this month or the first week of this month? And I think part of the reason is obviously there was a lot of use of crypto by the very wealthy in China to execute on capital flight out of China. It was a great way to get money out of China. But at a certain point, the government was always going to cut it off. They can't have this parallel economic system happening where people can freely defy the capital controls. And especially now that they've gotten very far along in plans to launch the digital renminbi. I think crypto in China was always headed this way. And it's because exactly this, authoritarian, totalitarian regimes don't exactly, their goals are not exactly aligned with personal freedoms. And that's basically exactly what cryptocurrency creates: personal, economic, financial freedom. So I hope everybody who's always worried about the dystopian dark future where blockchains are used by governments to control the financial movements of all their citizens, I hope they take this to heart, and I will talk to you soon.